and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled It's Not Privacy or Security, It's Both. I'm going to hand things over now to our Cybersecurity Product Manager here at New Horizons, Mr. Buckchow.
Thank you, Kelly, and welcome everybody. I am, as Kelly said, the Product Manager for Cybersecurity here at the New Horizons Corporate Office, and also like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is the 6th out of 10 cybersecurity-focused webinars that New Horizons is hosting in the month of October. If you've missed any of the previous cybersecurity webinars, you can find them on our website at newhorizons.com under webinars and go to recordings. October has been designated by the Department of Homeland Security as National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is now in its 15th year as an annual campaign, the goal of which is to raise awareness about the importance of cybersecurity. This is a collaborative effort between Department of Homeland Security, its public-private partners, including the National Cybersecurity Alliance, to raise awareness about not only cybersecurity, but also individual cyber hygiene. New Horizons Cybersecurity Awareness Month is now in our 3rd year as an annual focus month, and the goal of our Cybersecurity Month webinars, which are done in conjunction with our industry partners, is to provide you with a better understanding of how to stay safer online, with input from industry and subject matter experts to help enhance your organization's cyber resilience and overall cybersecurity posture. We also have a Cybersecurity Month landing pages that you'll find on your local New Horizons websites that you can find by going to www.newhorizons.com, clicking on Find a Location at the top of the page, and on the local pages, you will find Cybersecurity Month landing pages under Promotions, where you can find a full list of upcoming cybersecurity webinars, the past recordings, along with free downloadable cybersecurity resources. The 10 cybersecurity webinars that New Horizons is hosting this month cover different aspects about today's ever-evolving cyber threat landscape. Today, we're going to explore the intersection of privacy and cybersecurity, as you can't have one without the other, and how these go hand in hand. Our presenters are Alyssa Rosinski, Director of Global Channels and Partners, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, and Jeff Lelis, EVP Partners and Alliances at Logical Operations. I'd like to welcome you both, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Buck and Kelly, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about the intersection of privacy and cybersecurity. And not to pick on Facebook, but why do I have them here? One is because it's a notable brand. Two is that, as you probably have heard recently, Facebook has recently reported a breach of their personal data of subscribers. And you know, why are people attempting, these bad actors attempting to breach the Facebook security? Is it because they have the most impenetrable firewalls? No, it's not. It's because they have personal data for billions of subscribers. So like Facebook, many organizations, it's really not a matter of when, or if, I'm sorry, it's more a matter of when, right? We all are susceptible to this, and again, using Facebook as an example, but it could be any organization. And so the fact is that, again, it wasn't that someone was looking to so much breach the security of Facebook as it was to gain access to data. And so really you can see now the intersect between the two, and we'll talk as we talk more about that. One thing I do want to point out though as well is what's really changed is Facebook reported this breach within days. In the past, that may have taken longer, but what you will see is because of new laws and regulations like GDPR, which we'll explain further, we're starting to learn more about not only data privacy, but also how it's impacting organizations and how they're actually now working that into their internal policies and procedures, and how that's communicated out to their partners and customers as well. Another real a great example is Uber. Those who have read or seen recently, Uber was fined $148 million for a hack that took place back in November of 2016. At that hack, there was some driver information and rider information that was accessed. Again, the laws were different at that time, and Uber selected to take an alternative path, and it wasn't immediately reported. They since have made some changes within Uber and elected to pay a fine. And as you can see, they paid this $148 million to the Attorney General offices of the 50 US states and the District of Columbia. And again, what's notable here is the amount. The amount is in alignment with what we would expect from the most recent regulations and those that are guiding the global data protection world at this point, or regulations, which was at this 2%, and we'll learn more about that as we go along today as well. So, which is it? Again, GDPR, as we'll learn more about in this webinar, is the most progressive and far-reaching data privacy regulation at this time. As you can see, data privacy professionals on the left are concerned about the reliance on IT, which is cybersecurity, and this is research done by Forrester. On the right, we can see 93% of IT professionals, the people who are being relied on, report they are insufficiently prepared to tackle the requirements of data privacy. So you can again see the reliance of the two on each other, but again, at this point, neither feels entirely prepared to support the other's initiatives and objectives. And we'll talk more today how we can assist you in meeting those demands and bridging these gaps. So what is it? Is it security or data privacy? When I look at it, I like to look at security and data privacy side by side, and notice they're both are focused on the management and protection of data. A good way for me to think about it is to think about it as a castle, or cybersecurity, excuse me, as a castle, buttressed with a moat and high walls, built to keep its inhabitants safe. And then think of the data as the inhabitants, right? They come and go through the walls, but the queen ensures their safe passage and protection whenever within the walls. So as you can see, much like a kingdom or queen, in many cases led by queens now, the two are entirely reliant on one another and cannot really exist without the other, right? A castle or a kingdom doesn't exist without its inhabitants, and inhabitants need, and well, at least in the Middle Ages, required essentially the security of their kingdom. So let's just delve a little bit deeper into cybersecurity itself. So one other analogy we like to use, and this one is probably yet a better one, is a cloth. So if you think about it, a cloth is typically, it's woven strands of string, or whatever the material may be, and they intersect horizontally and vertically, right? So if I was to remove all the vertical lines, essentially you'd have a lot of horizontal strings, but there would be essentially nothing, the fabric wouldn't hold, and vice versa. If I removed all the horizontal, the vertical itself wouldn't hold. And so we really see cybersecurity and data privacy working hand in hand together, and you really can't pursue one without the other. And as I think we're starting to see, as both are being elevated in organizations, so they're not off in the corners of the building, but actually pertinent to everyone within the organization, all the way up through the executives that essentially provide the guidance or oversight that the two need to work together as we move forward. And we see this as we talked, as I showed the examples up front with Facebook and Uber. The fact is that what happened was, if in the cybersecurity world, we looked at those as breaches. In the data privacy or data protection world, we looked at those as not only being security breaches, but also how they affected the personal data of the individuals affected. So as you can see, where IT is responsible for securing the systems, within the systems lives the data, as we've talked about using that castle example. And so the IT professionals are going to now be more involved in not only essentially providing firewalls and hardware and software solutions, but also they're going to hold the responsibility for securing the data. So again, a privacy breach has really now become indistinguishable from a cyber breach. So if we look where we are today, what are the biggest barriers to success for CIOs or CISOs or the chief protection officers or the data protection officers, depending on your organization? Well, the fact is we know that for data privacy to be successful, cybersecurity needs to be successful. but we cannot address this success without understanding these barriers. And the barriers are, as asked, as you can see in this Gartner's research from last year, the largest barrier is the appropriate skills and resources, right? So like we always do, we'll have funding and budget challenges. There'll also be the needing to get management aligned, understanding the challenges with cybersecurity and data privacy, making sure that we have the technology available to us and there's alignment with the business. But even if all those things are occurring within organizations, the fact is that they don't have the skilled resources to define and implement, and then the ongoing management. So this is one of the things that we want to address in this webinar today, is how do we help you, guide you towards solutions which will help bridge this gap. And the fact is that really everyone needs to be prepared. From an IT perspective, and we'll talk about this from data privacy as well, but from an IT perspective, in the past, we've focused on the folks on the far right? The security professionals, right? So whether that's a pen tester, ethical hacker, analyst, et cetera, we've trained those folks and said, go forth and protect us, right? And then what we realized was, hey, you know what? We actually need more people involved. And so we started to see that IT professionals, your networking engineers, your system administrators, that, hey, many times they're the first line of defense, right? They're the ones that are able to interpret a log file and determine if there's potentially a denial of service attack. They're also the ones that many times are out there that are first to help rectify a potential gap in your security, whether it's a patch or something, a configuration or something else that they may implement to help further your own security within your organization. So we've started to train those folks and looking at them and saying, hey, what else can we do for them to help them is essentially to strengthen what the security team is doing. And now we have to look at all the employees, right? It's known that over 93% of all breaches occur because someone does something, more often than not with any malicious intent, but unknowingly or knowingly does something that allows someone to breach your infrastructure. And so the idea is that not only do we need to train our IT professionals and security professionals, but also we need to make all of our employees aware of the basic cybersecurity principles and how to essentially practice good cyber hygiene. And with that said, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Alyssa, and she'll take us through data privacy.
Thanks, Jeff. And obviously, thank you to the New Horizons team for this opportunity to talk today about data privacy. To start, I'd like to share a little bit about the IAPP and who we are and what we do. We are the world's largest professional association that is dedicated to privacy and data protection. We do things that are very similar to a lot of other associations. We have events that are held all over the world, a robust publications, content, and research department here. Notably, we have our training and our certification, which is very much the growth engine of the IAPP right now. We are also a non-advocacy based organization, so we are the big tent under which this privacy discussion is happening. And so right now we have, actually this says 43,000 members. When I sent these slides over, we actually have 44,655 as of today. So, and that's worldwide. So certainly seeing rapid growth. I've been at the IAPP for 7 years now. And when I first started, we were just about to crest 7,000 members. So it has been a wild ride to say the least. As you can see, our European membership base has grown exponentially. We're actually over 13,400 now. And this certainly is due much to the General Data Protection Regulation. We have about 16,500 certified individuals. And as I mentioned, we're seeing much of this due to GDPR. So the explosion is happening in membership based on the training and certifications. But The IAPP's mission, as you see, is to define, promote, and improve the privacy profession globally. This is what we do. We are dedicated to providing the tools necessary for those practitioners in the field doing this important work. So what is data privacy? Data privacy, data protection, information privacy, it's different things to different people. We see cultural and contextual differences. And so let me give you some examples of some cultural differences. And the example I typically use is in Europe, data protection is a fundamental human right. Here in the United States, in the past, I would say, we might have given out our social security number without too much thought. Hopefully this is changing. But for example, in countries such as India, you know, if you said privacy or talked about it, often the answer would be security. And so while these notions are changing as the topic of privacy has been thrust into the spotlight recently, this thing called privacy is still rather new. And there are deep-rooted ideas of what privacy means, and sometimes that's not easily changed. As for contextual differences, you know, this also can take on a few different forms. The notion of private or personal space, you know, just ask your kids what they think privacy means and you'll get some great answers. And if you juxtapose that against asking your parents, I did this recently and I asked our 10-year-old daughter what she thought privacy meant. And her answer was shutting the bathroom door. When I asked our 13-year-old son, he said, having only his closest friends as part of his group texts. And so then I just decided to ask my parents, and you know, their response was sort of with this level of fear and trepidation about anything digital, you know, their computer, their cell phone. My dad asked, you know, why does my dishwasher need to be connected to the internet? The interesting notion about privacy is that it also adapts to social norms. You know, what was once common can sometimes become uncommon because of the way that society reacts to it. And an example of this is, think about the news feed that used to be down the right-hand side of your Facebook feed. And it showed what all your friends were doing, whose pictures or posts they were commenting on. You know, this went away because there was kind of a backlash and people really didn't like it. And so we're going to start seeing these types of evolutionary changes with privacy as it just becomes more and more a topic. So as we look at the different landscape of privacy, both here and across the globe, here in the US, we have an array of privacy laws that apply to different sectors or people or industries. For example, we have COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And that applies to the online collection of personal information by persons or entities, you know, with regards to children under 13 years of age. I'm sure most of us are keenly aware of HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and the forms that we sign each time we go to the doctor's office, you know, and that safeguards your medical history and information. Another that we have is the CAN-SPAM, which is the Controlling the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing Act. That's a law that sets the rules for commercial email, allowing people to opt out of those sometimes, you know, annoying email and marketing messages. And then recently, you may have heard of CACPA. It's the California Consumer Privacy Act. And this is set to take effect in January of 2020 and would be really a huge game changer here in the United States. And what we're seeing now is that some of industry is starting to lobby hard up in Capitol Hill. And so we actually may see a piece of federal privacy law that could supersede this. So a lot to wait and be patient and see what happens on this side. But now we've added to this mix the EU General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. And this went into effect on May 25th of this year. It is the one piece of the largest, I should say, it is one of the largest pieces of legislation that has a global remit. It's not just a European piece of legislation, but global. And so if you are a US-based company doing business in Europe or holding on to EU citizens' data, you are subject to the GDPR. So just know that this piece of legislation has changed the landscape of data protection and how businesses operate on a global scale. We've seen here at the IAPP that some companies have spent the past 2 years preparing for it. Others are kind of in the middle of their preparations, and still others are just starting. So now that we're 6 months into when the regulation first went into effect, companies are wondering when the first enforcement action might happen and to which company. And then what changes once this happens. So I think to say that we are only in the nascent stages of GDPR is true. There's still so much more ahead, and companies can't afford to sit back and think that non-compliance is okay or they won't come after us. So in looking at where and what data privacy skills are needed, we think about who are these practitioners out in the industry? Who are these nearly 45,000 members that are making up the IAPP membership? Where are they coming from? For many years, the IAPP was largely comprised of lawyers, so from the law and compliance side of things. But with the explosion of privacy, we now have members joining us from all different industry sectors. We've in the past have called them adjacent profession. I don't think that's really true anymore, because really anybody that touches data, whether that's HR, finance, marketing, IT, customer service, is part of the privacy profession. So when I think about it, I think of like what company doesn't have troves of data that they're collecting and using about their customers. So all these employees, regardless of where they sit in an organization, who come in contact with this data, they have to be knowledgeable. They have to be aware at a minimum for what they can and cannot do with that data before a costly mistake happens. And so what's the best way to mitigate risk and become an enabler within the organization? A solid privacy and data governance program. It shows at a minimum that steps within an organization are being taken to create a culture of privacy, and nothing can be more powerful than that. So how are companies doing this? They are training their employees. And so here we see the IAPP's training and certification. We break it up into 3 different domains. We have the CIPP, which is our Certified Information Privacy Professional. And this really is the what of privacy and data protection. It's the laws, the policies, the regulations that sit behind what you can and cannot do with somebody's personally identifiable information. And then we have CIPM, which is our Certified Information Privacy Manager. And this is the how of privacy. How do you operationalize privacy within your organization? How do you conduct a privacy impact assessment or a data flow audit? How do you create a governance structure or build your team, your privacy team? And then we also have our CIPT, which is our Certified Information Privacy Technologist. And this is really privacy for the IT professional. It's how do you bake privacy in from the early stages into those controls and systems? Often it's called privacy by design. And so with this one, we look, at the IT and the InfoSec community. And then I would love to just share that, and we'll talk about this in just another slide, but all of our certifications, CIPP, CIPM, and CIPT, are all ANSI accredited under the rigorous ISO standards. And so I think that really leads us into why do certification and membership matter? As I just mentioned, our certifications are ANSI accredited under ISO standards, and I feel as though this is a huge differentiator for us. We are the only one in the marketplace that has this gold standard. And I think to know a little bit about what goes behind obtaining that is important. Our certification team goes through this rigorous process where our exams are continuously measured for reliability and validity. They perform job task analyses every 3 years, work with a psychometrician and exam managers to conduct standard setting meetings and performance health checks. And we ensure that our certified individuals merit recertification. And so this level of work demonstrates our integrity and a strong management of this process, ensuring our adherence to the standards. From the membership perspective, a key differentiator is that we support an individual throughout their career. So this support doesn't stop once a training is complete, but it's demonstrated by, as you can see, access to a network of this almost 45,000 data protection professionals around the world. We have various educational events that take place all the way from here in the States in DC and then to Singapore, Brussels. We just launched one in Munich, and we'll go to London. Actually, one in Austin, Texas is happening right now. And so again, this is an opportunity for individuals to continue to learn, know what the recent updates are to any laws and regulations, and have practical information and materials that they can bring back and implement as soon as they go back to the office. We also have a very robust resource center that has content specifically for members of the IAPP. And then we have our local knowledge net, which is our version of chapters that take place all over the world. And these are fantastic networking and educational meetings that happen throughout the year. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff for him to talk about what some of the requirements are.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. And as we learned earlier, one of the greatest challenges to CIOs and CISOs and CPOs is the lack of knowledge and skills in their organization or access to them to hire into their organization. But in addition to that, the fact is that training is, or at least the equivalent skills and knowledge, are requirements of laws and regulations, and specifically we're going to focus on GDPR here. So within GDPR, there's 3 articles. If you are not familiar with GDPR, it's made up of a number of articles, and there's 3 of them that speak specifically to preparation or training of your personnel. The first one I'm going to focus on is Article 39. There's actually 3 articles, 37 through 39, that talk about your data protection officer, or DPO. And 39 specifically speaks to the fact that the data protection officer is required to have not only themselves to have the requisite skills and knowledge, but also involved in the training of staff involved in processing operations and related audits. So again, in this case, you're going to want to make sure that your DPO has received training, and we'll talk about a potential solution from the IAPP that helps prepare them for that requirement. but again, having someone with that skill set, and within GDPR, if you required to comply with GDPR, that person either needs to be on staff or somehow affiliated through a third party, or it could be spread across several different solutions. Article 47 actually speaks to the fact that anyone that's involved in having permanent or regular access to personal data is required to receive appropriate data protection training. So going back to Alyssa's example earlier, when you look at those functions across an organization, very horizontal, right? Everything from marketing to sales to IT, HR, and customer service, and beyond that, the folks that are going to be involved in identifying, creating, implementing, and managing, or overall responsible for those processes around data protection or handling the data on a regular basis, or and responsibility for that, need to have training to do so. And then finally is Article 70, and this really what shows you essentially the impact of GDPR and its effect is that all the way up through the board of an organization will have responsibility for promotion of common training programs. So again, GDPR is obviously much more expansive. These three articles are focused on how to prepare individuals in your organization all the way through everyone in your organization so they can take part in ensuring the protection of the data of your clients, partners, and your employees as well. So for those folks that want to move into a data protection role, Alyssa talked a little bit about two of their programs, CIPP and CIPM, and this is where the two come together as a 4-day program, and that would be best suited again for providing the skills and knowledge necessary for someone to become involved in data as a data protection officer. Again, it does not guarantee their success, but it gives them the foundation in which to grow, and again, leveraging the membership and other capabilities provided by IAPP and their own organization to potentially excel, or hopefully excel in that position. GDPR Essentials, this is a e-learning offering, so self-paced. It's at roughly 45 minutes to 60 minutes, in duration, comprised of two modules. One is the essentials of data privacy, again, defining what it is, and in very basic terms. Again, this is for all your staff, so we're not going to get into the depths of data privacy, but it essentially pull out those foundational pieces and definitions that they would need to understand. And then do the same for the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, is, again, the foundational information that they need to know and understand. And again, much like in the cybersecurity world where you want them to have good cyber hygiene, it's the same thing with data privacy. And again, having the knowledge of the two and marrying them will allow them from a day-to-day perspective, whether you're an accountant, a marketing professional, a sales professional, engineer, etc., that you're every day as you, whether logging into your computer or accessing systems or data, otherwise you understand how to, the impact of your actions on your organization and beyond. One other requirement that is more technical in nature is around incident response. And this, as you can find in Article 33 and 34. I won't read the articles to you, but essentially what it says is that within 72 hours of identifying a breach, that you have to communicate this information. So we used Facebook as an example, and again, this is where Facebook excelled in this most recent breach. Again, was, hey, listen, we identified it and we communicated it. And as they learned more about it, they communicated the specifics of it, right? So that was actually, from our perspective at least, was an example of what we expect to see happening when organizations unfortunately incur a breach, that they will be reporting this in a timely manner, and they'll be actually informing both the data protection authorities, but also the subjects, the individuals who've been impacted by that potential breach. There is another offering from another New Horizons partner, CertNexus, CyberSec First Responder, and this is a offering of training that helps prepare individuals for, and this is for technical professionals or security professionals. And as you can see, it focuses on the three phases of cybersecurity, both before, during, and after an attack, with most of it heavily weighted towards how do you respond to an incident and communicate that out. So again, both the technology behind that, but also the processes and communication protocols one would develop in their business policies. And with that said, we come to an example. This is not intended to be a prescriptive learning path for any individual in an organization. The intent really here is to demonstrate that whether you're a security or privacy professional, an IT professional, or within a functional group, the fact is that you're now all involved in this, again, the intersect of cybersecurity and data privacy, right? So again, if I'm a marketing manager and I'm going to send a commercial email, I need to understand, who am I sending it to? Do I have to require opt-in, opt-out? When they come to our website, same thing. Even from a technology standpoint, if I'm actually tracking, through cookies, et cetera, what's the information I present to them, so they can, again, as an individual, elect to determine how they want to interact with your website and what information they want stored. And it would be the same in your legal teams, right? Defining what your privacy policies are, and where do they display, and how are they displayed, and how are they communicated to, again, your clients and partners and even employees. And so the fact is that the skills and knowledge to do this are broadening, as well as deepening in the specialist or the professional areas. So again, the idea in working with New Horizons is to better ascertain what are your needs within your organization, who has those needs, and then essentially tailoring the skill development for those individuals. And as I move to the far left, the fact is, again, what we'll see is that all end users should have some level of awareness training. We in our organization, every year, we take both CyberSafe and GDPR Essentials. So we know everyone in our organization. We've at least have made our commitment as an organization from both protection of our brand or elevation of our brand, as well as the protection of our partner and client and our employee data, that we're taking every step necessary to make sure everyone's involved, everyone's aware, and they're participating in the process. And if something does occur, they understand why it occurred. And at this point, we're ready for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff and Alyssa. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to type those in now. We will go ahead and address those over audio. We'll be on the line for the next few minutes to do that. In the meantime, just wanted to remind you all that this webinar is being recorded, so you will all receive a link to view the session recording later today, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. I also want to recommend that you all reach out to your local New Horizons for further information on all of your cybersecurity training and certification needs. If you aren't familiar with who your local New Horizons is, you can go on our website at newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center nearest you. And there you can also find all of our cybersecurity training and courses as well. All right, it looks like we do have a couple questions, Jeff. So let's get right to it. How often should employees receive data privacy and cybersecurity awareness training?
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, although it's not prescribed in GDPR, the frequency of training and other laws and regulations will differ, but it's recommended on an annual basis. And the reason for this is that, as we see, right, technology changes at a very rapid pace. And because, again, technology is the underpinning of cybersecurity and data protection, is that over a 12-month period, there will be enough change in both, whether it's regulations or technology, that we prescribe that it should occur for your entire staff, at least on an annual basis. And then for those professionals that are more immersed in it, again, defining policies and procedures and implementing them, the associated technologies, that will be somewhat dependent upon, again, the regulations and the technology that they've actually have incorporated into their environment. So that could, again, most likely on an annualized basis, but it could be more frequent if needed.
All right, and is a data protection officer required for every organization to be fully compliant with GDPR?
And Alyssa, would you mind taking that one?
Yeah, so the and we can certainly follow up with a more detailed answer to this one, but it's not required in the private sector. In the public sector, there is a requirement for it. So, and then you're going to also see if based on the type of data that is being held in the processing of it, will determine whether a DPO is needed. And then there's also some further breakdowns about, various size of organization, the amount of data that they have, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, and to further that, I think what we would say is it's best advised to consult with your own your legal team or with a third-party consultant, because every business is going to be a little bit different. But what we would say is in talking about this is whether it's a data protection officer or someone that has a similar role or responsibilities in the organization, it is becoming best practice as an organization that deals with data, that you are taking that, obviously not only to avoid penalties, but also to ensure the respect and ongoing commitment to your brand and business as well.
All right, and this next one I think is for both Buck and Jeff to respond. How would you guys compare CIPT versus CISSP?
Yeah. So I'll start, and then Buck, if you want to take it further. If you look at it, CISSP is obviously theoretical, intended for those that are, again, developing policies and procedures as related to cybersecurity, but it's more focused on the technology aspects of cybersecurity, and whereas CIPT is more focused on the technology aspects of data privacy. Again, as we saw, there's a great intersect between the two, but there's things that are unique to both. So if I'm a security professional, I think CIPT is a value because it now takes essentially some of those theoretical components of what data is on the security side, and you uncover those in CIPT, and vice versa. If I'm a data privacy professional who has responsible for technology, I would, after CIPT, CISSP could be a good add-on to that domain of knowledge that I've gained in CIPT.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I think we can go ahead and wrap things up. That will conclude all of our questions for today. So thank you again, Alyssa and Jeff, so much for joining us and speaking on behalf of New Horizons.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for future webinars. As Buck mentioned earlier, you can find them all on our website at newhorizons.com. Just click on the webinars link and you can register for any upcoming sessions or view past recordings in our webinar archive library. Thanks so much, everyone. That will conclude today's webinar. You may now log off. Have a great day.